So once again, my name is Kate. I am from Nizhny Novgorod, and I will tell you about my experience in working in a very group project. It's already 3.5 years old. And as Jana already said, before I became a designer of interfaces, I was a landscape designer, a media designer, and then tried to be a front-end developer. And in our project, there is 2 UX designers. It's me and our UX prime from customer side. Mera is outsourced company. And we together work on all the interface. And this work is quite far from articles about developing interfaces, how it's amazing and how it's great. Sometimes it's not. So here you can see what I'm going to tell you about. And professional interfaces, which our common work on, they usually very high specialized, and people from all the earth cannot understand them by themselves. We can teach our users to use these interfaces, and that's okay. It's professional applications, not mass stories from internet. I was going to talk how to develop a product if you don't have a UX designer in your team, or maybe you are working on your own project or not in a company. So, how to deal when your development just started. At first, you have to pick a UI. It's a great idea to use references. Maybe, for first time it will look like this situation. You took some great interface, some great UI kit, tried to copy it, and something failed. That's okay. Sometimes it happens. You can restyle your product. Next, when you are working on different interfaces, you have to remember that different technologies like web or mobile devices or desktop application have a very different controls. For example, for the web, we don't have a double click, but for mobile devices, there is a plenty of gestures, but our users don't use them frequently. And sometimes we have to tell users, okay, you can have to scroll by 2 fingers our pages. And documentation, it's a very boring part of our work, but if we don't track our documentation, soon it will be impossible to find any actual information. And we have to find not a page on a wiki, but a person who can say what it was done in this way. Next, just at the beginning of developing of your product, think about content accessibility. Don't forget about visually impaired people who cannot hear your interface, who must use screen readers, and this standard is including a lot of information how to deal with this very difficult theme. And there is a lot of best practices, advices, the examples how do not do in your product, and you can find a lot of it in interface. For American, it's section 508. It's their law about accessible information for everybody. And if you can make accessible interface using this standard, you can be sure it will meet the American section 508. Next, when you start to develop an interface, you have to choose the smallest screen you will support and test everything you created on it. maybe not just every screen, but key screens you must test, and it will avoid a lot of surprises in future. And unified UI and UX. At the beginning, it's simple to keep just several pages, looks, and works in the same way. But later you will get this situation. Model windows. That's my own opinion, but I see this problem in many products when the program blocks the work of users' work because want to show some information, useless information. Like here, we know that there is a problem here. We didn't select anything, but instead of select something we need, we have to click OK here. And it makes crazy a lot of people who use Photoshop and use this function in Photoshop. So if you want to tell your user something without blocking his work, just give him a toast. It is a splashing panel, usually in the bottom left corner, and say everything you want to him here. So you have to choose, will your customers customize the UI or won't? If they will, you have to limit what they can do, or the accessibility, the appearance of all your product will be ruined at all, because they can be so creative. Also, you can create a UI kit when you just start it, or buy it, or create a clone of something that already somebody used and created, and you just about to install it, use its reference. Also, you can try atomic design. It's when every button, every checkboxes, every text field is an atom, and you create molecules using them, like 3 buttons in a row. It's cancel, action 1, action 2. And using these molecules, you create a template, when a text field, checkbox, 3 buttons. And as a result, you will get a predictable arrangement of elements on the screen and a constructor. You won't think about where I have to place it. And users will be very grateful when they see it. They won't have to search on every page a new place for the button. And don't forget that the first thing to be done is design, and only then can developers work on it. There is a GIF, I don't know why it doesn't work, about time machine they need after the deadline passed. Is it any way to play this? Sorry. And here is an example how we can create a product from scratch. There is references from Dribble. Also, you can use Behance or sites with the list of best sites of this year or of previous years. And where is my favorite site with UI kits? And yeah, they are working. You can use them as references. So I selected these refs for my imaginary project. And in the beginning, there is just one screen, one web page, where user can click do good, and the system does something good. And soon it will be clear enough that user need a personal page, and a technical support need a simple page to handle all information from users. And here you can see what I've just told you about. It's a functional zoning. You can see personal information here, navigation, content area, and place which will be overshadowed by our toasts. Next, it's very familiar controls and very familiar elements. You can easily recognize a table, some counters, selector, avatar, navigation button, and common buttons. And also I didn't create any mobile or tablet version for this product because it's very hard to handle all information about this on a little mobile screen. So this project starts to grow, some new releases are planned, and how to work next. So firstly, you haven't be afraid of interactive prototypes. You can test interface before its implementation using this. And it's a great idea to present all interactive models to developers, to managers, and for customers. They will be amazed. Documentation, you have to still track it. And for UI design and UX design, documentation is usually mockups and test results documentation. So it all have to be stored on wiki page, not in the head. Sometimes you have to go with your product to new platforms, or maybe just create a mobile web version for your desktop application. And Windows, macOS, Android, iOS, they all knows better what user wants. And you have to decide that, will you adapt your product or preserve as much as possible on different platforms. And keep design consistent. Don't surprise your users. You already have UI kit, or now it's time to create one or buy, and it won't surprise your users. And there is a little fun part, but frankly it's more sad than fun. So sometimes we have to choose between beautiful and convenience of the system and the actual working system. And usually developers win. But if you have UI kit, if you have all documented error validations, all behavior of elements, this situation will be really rare, only if you have a very limited time for developing. And sometimes our developers from any project on the backend too, they make decisions about UI and UX, and maybe they cannot understand that even small changes can break appearance, accessibility, and greatly affect user scenarios. And it will be very hard to fix all these in the future. And on each stage of design, at each stage of development, design getting worse. And when mockups are ready, designers cannot relax. They have to go to reviews, have to supervise what's going on the actual screens. And some practice again. Here is the product I already showed you. But here I fixed the UI problems, and now it can be simply read by people with some visual problems. To fix UX, it will take a lot more time. If you open that standard I show you, you will see a lot of rules, but they usually are very simple. Next, project's growing, we get a lot of new pages and have to show all of them in our navigation bar. So At first, it was just several pages. Now, there is a lot of them. You can use submenus to handle all this, but I tried to keep one-level navigation, so user can easily use hotkeys to switch between pages. Next, we still have the same limited space on the screen, but we have a lot of new functions, new texts, new buttons. So, great idea to use drop-downs and submenus. Like here, you have just 3 lines in the list, and now you have dozens of them. You can group them. And if you don't want your user to scroll in all these lists for searching something, you can add a search field, and user just type something here and get results. It will save some, maybe seconds of the work. And at the beginning, we have just 3 buttons. Now we have dozens of them on the same space. So you can hide some buttons in the drop-down menu and show on the page just very common actions. One more time about model windows. It's very easy to get in a trap with them. Imagine you have to open the first model window to create a project. Then you have to open the second model window to set a customer data. And then you have to open the third model window to set a type. And then you get something you have immediately to react, like a call. So you have to close one window, another window, and then don't forget to press Save as Draft, so you won't lose all your changes. Much more easy, create just one model window with drop-downs. So you can see, you stop working with that, click Save as Draft, and switch to call. And you get much more users from different countries. You have to localize your product. And now you will understand that different languages have different characters, height, alignment, typesetting, and there is no font that could handle all of these. So you can rely on the fact that your users will see only system fonts in their screens. Or you can use several fonts you choose by yourself. And the good idea in this case to use something what was tested a lot, like Rabota for Latins and Cyrillic, and Nota for Asian languages. It's Google fonts, they are free, they tested a lot, and if you'll get any problems, you can be sure somebody already fixed it. Complex forms. So here you can see that at first, at the beginning, was just several text fields. Now you have 5 of them, or later you will have dozens with switches and checkboxes. And to simplify work with them, you could keep equal behavior of different elements. So your user won't be surprised why here he can type something in this way, but here he couldn't do it. Because you know it's different fields, but he see it, they are equal. And when you release your changes, you will see cognitive resistant effect. When people don't want to use something new, something they don't know, just because they used to something old. And yes, so you have to choose your user to use a new interface and not be afraid of this negative reaction. And if I have some more time, great. I'm tell you how to deal with UX designer if you have one in your team. So, feedback is very important. You can express your doubts and say that you don't agree with some solutions in mockups or in prototypes. That's okay, because on the early stage of development, it's very easy to make changes in design and in the code. Let's come to developer or come to a designer with a problem and don't ask him to take only your own solution. Designers think not in use cases, but in user scenarios. So they can bring you a more interesting, more good solution for a problem. And feel free to ask, because maybe you see something strange in mockups, maybe you don't understand why this design was chosen, but before implementation, developers has to know why it's done in this way, why they have to implement this solution. Maybe it's just a mistake. We're all humans, and sometimes developers make mistakes, sometimes designers. So you can ask and get an answer that's sorry, it's a mistake, or just don't do it. Just a minute, I'll fix. And it will save a lot of your time. So that's all, folks. I hope you enjoyed my talk.
Thank you, Ekaterina. And now we have a question. How do you work on internationalization and accessibility of your products?
Sorry.
Я думаю, что это вопрос про disabilities.
Да,
Вот этот вот.
Localization. Yeah. Okay, so for accessibility, at first I read several times the standard, and just I list that we have to support in our project. When we have to implement all of this, and I started to test, I was using only keyboard, then I used only mouse, then I just turned off my monitor and used only screen reader. It's very hard because it's very new, something new for me. In some companies, people just ask blind person to do this. That's okay for this testing. And for localization, I'm working in the web project, so we use flexboxes, and we have this freedom just to set the space on the screen for a text, so it will be set for every localization word.
Thank you. And one more. How do you do your design work understandable for developers, and which programs do you use?
I use Experience Design from Adobe. It's our customer's solution. They like Adobe products. And this is free program. That's great. And
how do you do your design understandable for developers?
I hope it's understandable. Sometimes I just consult our developers why I do this design. We use the interactive prototypes. That's great. You can create a list of mockups and say in this XD program or Figma, Sketch. I think for now every program supports this function. You can say if somebody presses this button, the picture will switch to this picture. So it's like really work with a real interface, but without implementing all the code.
Mm-hmm. And how do you react if developers couldn't implement your design?
Okay, we have to change it. Or maybe we can make some little iterations by implementing it for this month we will do this, for next month we will do that enhancement and another enhancement in this way.
Okay, and we have the question from the audience, yes?
Hello, Ekaterina. How do you think, is it really important to use controls native relatively to the operating system instead of creating ones by yourself?
As we are working on a very big product, we create our own systems. But I was trying to make some advices for developers how to work by themselves. So it's better to use something that somebody already created. And just don't try to be creative to start to implement some of your thoughts, your ideas, because you just don't have enough skills to understand that something won't work in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, hello. Can I ask a question?
Yes.
From here. Okay, how often do you have to create some solutions for UI design that maybe don't have libraries for developers yet?
Sorry, can you repeat? It was very
All right.
coherent.
UI solutions that maybe don't have libraries for developers. How often you do that?
Sorry, I really cannot hear you.
Еще раз. Okay. How often do you create some solutions for design that if there are no libraries supported for developers?
Okay.
Yes.
From time to time, it depends on what we are working on. Sometimes we use just some very familiar tools, some very familiar controls like buttons or switches. But yes, sometimes we have to invent something very new, and I think it's better to ask developers how they handle with it.
And how they react on that? How developers react on that?
Oh, great, something interesting now.
Really? Okay, thanks.
What are some of the biggest challenges you face as a UX designer?
The biggest challenge there was when I started to work with our foreign clients, and I started to answer their questions in our meetings, in our video calls, and once I realized that nobody from Russian side talks, only me. So they were, yeah, great. You can talk with them, and we could work, drink some tea, do some duties. And when I realized it, I was very afraid that it's a lot of new experience. But then, yeah, let's go, went okay.
Thank you. And one more. What have you found out only on practice that you could not get from all the theory?
I think most of this stuff, because usually people say about how to do, but this is something internal from what I'm working on.
Okay. Is it true that very often the customers ask for minor changes to the already finished work? For example, turn the circle, tell about the situation, please.
I think when design is finished, they don't ask anything to change because we are working together from on the draft, then on interaction design, then we have a ready documentation, and yeah, they will agree. If they have some new solutions, some new doubts, they express them on early stages.
Okay, thank you. And the last one?
Thank you. Do you use some control versions in your work? Maybe you create libraries in Sketch, or you use abstract or something else?
No, we use only Adobe XD, and yeah, we have version of our documentation, and we have a list of changes with dates when they were made. So when somebody came and say, oh, in April we decided to do that, and I can say, oh, you know, in March we finished to work on this feature. You can see it in the list. And for tracking all changes, we use Git.